Hi everybody, Andrew back for another Barista Basics video. Now of course, before I get into today's topic, I need to make my disclaimer that any opinions stated in my videos are my own. I am not here to represent Starbucks or any other corporation or impede on any of these companies' intellectual properties or trademarks. My videos are of course just meant for fun and educational purposes. So with that said, we can go ahead and get into today's topic, which is about the three main varieties of the coffee bean. So as we've learned throughout these series of videos, coffee that we consume comes from a plant. And like the majority of plants, there are a variety of subspecies. And this concept is especially important for coffee beans because not only do different species require different growing conditions, their physical appearance, and how they taste once they are, harvested and produced into the coffee we consume, also greatly vary. So without further ado, I can go ahead and explain each one of our three most popular varieties of coffee, starting with our arabica. Now, arabica coffee accounts for between 60 to 70% of the entire world's coffee production, so it is widely the most popular. Now, the reason why I have this range here is because the majority of sites I consulted gave 60% or, around that number as the percentage of world coffee production, but I also found a few sites that went upwards of 70. So I thought I would include this range here in an effort to be the most accurate. Regardless of whatever percentage it really is though, we can all agree that it is certainly, like I said, the most widely consumed and the most widely produced. So now to get into some specifics, first on its growing conditions, arabica coffee grows best in higher elevations, on average between 2,000 and 6,000 feet, and also does extremely well on steep terrain. It does not perform, of course, this means that it does not perform very well on lowland or flat land. Now regarding its, sort of temperature and moisture, rainfall requirements, the ideal temperature range on average for arabica coffee growth is 64 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and out of all three types of coffee I have listed here, it on average requires the most amount of annual rainfall. Now to speak on the actual anatomy, the physical appearance of the arabica coffee bean, it is, which makes sense, the most recognizable. It is, if you think of a coffee bean, you're most likely going to think of how an arabica coffee bean looks. And that's because it is oval shaped and relatively flat with a pretty dark and rich color to it. Now, to sort of speak on its characteristics and flavors, it has a low acidity and is light to medium bodied typically. Regarding its flavors more specifically, it is sweet overall with, notes of fruit, chocolate, nuts, and caramel, and it's also very aromatic. So we can kind of see why arabica coffee is the most popular, because it is arguably the most flavorful, sort of the most well-rounded of all of our three coffees here. Now, moving on to our robusta coffee, this makes up about 30% of the world's coffee production. Regarding its growing conditions, as opposed to arabica, robusta coffee does not require high elevations or steep terrain, so it can grow well on flat terrain. Regarding its ideal temperature range, 72 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit is ideal for growing robusta coffee beans. Sorry, this urge to itch just totally came over me. Sorry about that. So 72 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit is our ideal temperature range. And compared to our arabica coffee, it requires less average annual rainfall. However, with that said, it does require generally a more consistent annual rainfall, whereas arabica can more or less, handle itself with a wider range of, the amount of annual rainfall. Robusta is pretty stern on the amount that it needs. So, to speak on the anatomy, the physical appearance of our Robusta coffee, it is more circular than our Arabica coffee, and this also implies that it's more rounder as opposed to flat. Regarding its color, it is not as dark as our Arabica coffee and is pretty pale in comparison. Now, moving on to its characteristics and flavors. Sorry again. It is, medium acidity and is pretty full bodied. It is also, it also has been described as having an earthy flavor, as well as sort of a rubbery and almost grain-like flavor, which is not very pleasant, of course, but we will get into that a little bit later. Regarding its aftertaste, it has been described as having a pretty strong peanutty aftertaste. So, relating back to what I just said, it tastes kind of rubbery and isn't super pleasant to enjoy on its own, which is why it is ideal for its usage in coffee blends as well as iced coffee. Certain types of espresso as well are best suited utilizing Robusta coffee since it's so bitter and dark. Now, some interesting facts that distinguish Robusta from Arabica is that Robusta coffee has almost 2 times the amount of caffeine that Arabica coffee does, as well as, on average, produces on about 2 times as much yield, the actual amount that you can harvest of the bean compared to Arabica. So it, this explains why it is less than half as popular as Arabica. Now, moving on to our last type of coffee bean here, we have the liberica. And this makes up less than 2% of the entire world's coffee production. So it is pretty rare, far and few in between, and this of course means that it's relatively pricey. Now, regarding its growing conditions, it grows best in low elevations on, on flat land, and it doesn't need to be on steep terrain either. Regarding its rainfall requirements, I couldn't find a lot of information on its temperature range, but I assume it's, somewhere relatively close to our ranges for our other 2 types of coffee. However, I was able to find information regarding the amount of rainfall, and the websites I consulted said that it is the most drought resistant compared to our other 2 types of coffee, so it can survive the best with the least amount of rainfall. Moving on to its anatomy, its physical characteristics, it, for lack of a better word, is kind of the ugly duckling, the black sheep, I guess, of our 3 types of coffee here. It is pretty irregularly shaped, pretty asymmetrical, and there isn't a lot of uniformity in how the beans look. However, one commonality between all Liberica beans is that they are certainly much larger than our 2 counterparts. Now, to move on to its characteristics and flavors, it is light to medium bodied, and I couldn't find a lot of information on its acidity. which is a bit unfortunate. And I can't really make a justified, prediction or estimate on how acidic it is. So rather than relay incorrect information, I will just omit that information. Now, regarding its flavors, it has been described as slightly woody, slightly smoky, also bitter, as well as having a nutty flavor with hints of chocolate, spice, and berries. And I should also mention, and this is we will expand on this in next week's video, but these are sort of just generalities. So, not every type of arabica coffee is going to, be light to medium bodied or taste sweet necessarily. The growing region where the coffee is grown specifically is, plays a huge factor in this as well. Even the differences as small as the specific farm where the coffee is grown can greatly impact its ending flavor and characteristics. So I just wanted to make that statement that these are just generalizations, and not every type of arabica or robusta or liberica coffee is going to taste how I've described here. But on average, as a general rule of thumb, this is the most widely accepted information. So with that said, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video, of course. I hope that you guys learned something interesting. And I also hope that this video, encouraged you or inspired you to try maybe a different type of coffee. Maybe you didn't even know that these other types of coffee existed. To be honest, I didn't even know liberica coffee existed. So I learned something new today too. And equally, I hope that you guys did. And like I said, I hope that it inspires you to try something new. That aside, I hope that you guys are having a great start to 2020. And I hope that you guys are having a great day. And I hope to see you guys in next week's video, which, like I said, is going to discuss sort of more specifics regarding the certain regions where coffee is grown. So I hope to see you guys next week for that, and I thank you so much for checking this video out. Thanks.